Ondrej Nekvasil, production designer for The Wheel of Time. This is a very popular book series. Were you familiar with the books before you joined the show?
Actually, I wasn't. I didn't read them before. I read the first book once. I had a first meeting with the producer. So first time I heard about the possible show, I read over the Christmas. I read the first book, but I didn't read the books before I started working on the show.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, I was kind of connected with that story only once when I started working on the show.
Mm-hmm. Is that something you like to do when you're unfamiliar with the source material? You want to like look at it and read it?
So it's what is specific is that of course I always like the primer source, which was the book, but of course what was quite important for me was the script, which is slightly different than the scripts, which are slightly different than the books. And they are like combining the details from the different books together to creating the world which is there. So in one moment I'm becoming confusing by the books because I kind of fixing the story from the books, and suddenly I got the scripts and immediately like I'm saying, oh, maybe that direction was the better for in the book. So I'm in some point I'm like I stop reading the books and I'm just focusing on the scripts and working with the scripts mostly.
Mm-hmm.
But there was no like a visual materials connected with the books because there was no like a illustrations or illustrator involved in the books, and there were also the only kind of visual thing was the map of the world, which was created by the Robert Jordan, writer, and that was it. And after that there are some fun arts, but we never followed the fun art, so we were really focusing on the book. And what was our advantage, that we had a very good researchers, and she was so specific about like she knows the book so well that she is actually able to tell you that this detail is appear in the book 3 and in the book 10 in the book 8, and she was kind of like our Wikipedia of that story, so we can always like ask her, we have that prop and we have that specific prop, is that appearing only in this book or we will need it later, and do we have any more description of that, or we are in this room, do we have any more description than this chapter? And she was always like a very helpful to help us to give us the descriptions, but the description in the book was the kind of our key source for our visual concept.
Mm-hmm. Well, the book fans, like, they've waited a long time for an adaptation, and like I feel like any fan of any book series, like they have in their minds like what like certain like places and rooms and whatever look like. So do you keep that in mind when you're designing and adapting a book?
Like as I said, like we were like really turning to the book. The book was the key thing for us. So when we had a description of the place, we used the book, and of course we have to make it possible, like a production-wise, that we couldn't build like as the scale of as is described in the book. So we have to always think about the practical part of it, how we will make it work for our show and for our schedule. But in general, of course, like there are some visions of like mostly regarding the props, and some people could be disappointed that some props look different than they thought. It's quite possible like that people didn't please everybody, but we tried our best. That's what I can say.
Yeah. Well, it's the story is set in an unnamed time and place. So what kind of leeway does that give you as a production designer?
So what was like the key point for our designs and the whole thinking about the visual part of the world was actually the way how the whole show is casted. So we have a very diverse cast, and when we had a very first meeting with our showrunner Rafe Judkins, that we discussed that actually in our world, that's our specific world, that word and all the people mixed so many times. So they don't have to, they are not talking about the ethnics and the races, because in these words doesn't exist. So there's no ethnics and races. There are only places that you are coming from this town or that town, but it doesn't matter what is the color of your skin, because you have a small village in the middle of the mountains and suddenly you have a very diverse people living in that village, but it's completely normal. and it's normal because that word turning so many times that actually the cast and the people turning as well, and they travel and they move from the place to place. So you have a village in the middle of the mountains, and suddenly you have a different from our point of view different ethnics, but from their point of view there are no different ethnics. And we did the same thing that we when we did let's say the mountain village, that we put together all the interesting details from the different type of mountain village, starting from Alps, going through Russia to the Alpine village in Japan and to China, and we create our world, which is very specific for our show. That's we always establish the rules for the different environment, and but we were picking the pieces from all around the world to make it happen, to make the kind of visual and consistent look of the place. So, and it was not starting just with the architecture, but also with the materials and with the details, how they work with the materials and how they use the, let's say color, how they use the pattern and the texture on the rooms and on the spaces, yeah, and also on the furniture and the props as well. So we always decide, okay, here they do have a lot of trees, so there'll be more wooden structures, and the rocks, so there'll be rocks and wood, and somewhere else there'll be more a clay and the straw. So we combine these ideas together, and that's how we create the world for each town or each place or each village which we meet on the way. No,
like the characters are traveling in every episode, and a lot of it is outdoors. And I know you guys shot in the Czech Republic. So what went into scouting the right locations for the right landscapes? Because sometimes there's snow, sometimes it's a wooded area, and sometimes it's just kind of rural. So how did you go into looking for the proper locations?
Yeah, so we had some kind of map of our mental map of the journey, so we know what we would like to achieve in each places. And we shot in Czech Republic, we shot in Slovenia, we shot in Croatia, and we shot partly in the Canary Islands. So we get a different type of landscapes for our show and different kind of environment. And we established okay, here is that these are the forests. That is more a kind of sandstones and the forest, and this is more a limestone and the white, and more oaks forest than the pine forest. So we establish always the journey and the area where we are moving on by the nature as well. And after we scouted interesting spots, which take some time, because actually every single place we were shooting, it's protected by the law, because everything what is in Europe, everything what looks like a nice nature, it's always protected by the law, because there's not so many a wild nature here. So technically it took a long time to get all these permissions done. We were shooting in a few national parks. It was very tricky to get there, to get all these permission works, and there was really a limited amount of crew and limited amount of people who can step up. In Slovenia, we were in the first zone of the national park. We got a very special permission just for the very limited crew to be there in 2,200 meters, and all of that was kind of process. But I think that we found a really nice spots all around Europe for that, or in these three countries, which can give us the specific look for the show and for the journey. I believe so. Yeah.
So what went into designing the White Tower, and how much of that did you guys build, and how many parts of it were there?
So actually the White Tower was I should say the most complicated task for us, because there was so many different influences and different opinions about the look of it. We ended up with the kind of very distinctive architecture of the temple, which is mostly inspired by some Indian temples and some details of the Indian cities, of the really medieval Indian cities. And we did a lot of resources for a lot of versions, and I should say no other set has so many versions and so many choices like the White Tower. I should say that in one point I think that we counted and we had 35 different concept arts next to each other, looking for the right spot of it. And after that, we built as much as possible all the interiors, of course, and all the kind of key sets. And plus, we had the White Tower took like 3 stages to maybe 4, I should say, maybe 4 stages to film all the interiors, and the rest was CG, which we did like usually we are like designing all the stuff and giving that to the visual effects team with some notes and with some references what we are looking for to get how is the look like and what we would like to get from that look of the White Tower. But it was the most complicated one because there's so many attention in the book, and we were looking for the right style for it, and I hope that we get it.
Oh, for sure. Like there's definitely visually it's very striking in certain scenes with it, because it's like there's so much like the marble, and it just really pops off the screen. Well, you guys you're currently shooting the 2nd season, right?
Yeah, we are in the middle of the 2nd season at the moment. Yeah, we are about like finishing, because we are shooting in blocks, like every director is shooting 2 episodes as a 1 block, which is I think that our only chance because of the locations and getting all these permissions done. So we are now in the middle of the 2nd season. Yeah, almost ready to finish the 2nd block. Not yet.
Awesome. I can't wait to see it. Well, Ondrej, thank you so much for your time. It was great speaking with you, and we'll see you back in a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you.